Today is June 2nd, 2017, and I am interviewing William Pomerich. William is 65 years old, having been born on October 24th of 1951. My name is Sue Burkholder, and I will be the interviewer. William, for the recording, would you please state in what war and branch of service that you served?
Oh, I fought in the Vietnam War in the Army 2nd 19th Artillery, 1st Cal.
All right, thank you. Well, to start with, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, like when you were born, and a little bit about your parents and your family?
Okay, I was born in Chicago, in Illinois. Lived there for about 5 years until after, kindergarten. After that, we moved out to the suburbs. My father was a construction worker. My mother was a waitress. They worked hard for a living. They always had to. And my father even worked 2 jobs at one time in that. I had 2 sisters and 2 grandmothers. We all lived together. We believed in you take care of the family, which includes your elderly and everything in the home. And that brought up respectively that way and everything, respectfully and everything.
Were your sisters older or younger?
Younger than me.
And what were their names?
Kimberly and Vicky.
Okay, all right. And your parents' names?
That would be William. I was named after my father, and Arlette, my mother.
Okay. All right. Did you have any other family members that joined the service?
Just my father. He was in the Army. He went, like I was saying, he was in World War II, of course, and he was operating the landing craft during the big battles from the ships to the shore.
Okay. Cool. And before you entered the service, what was your occupation or what were you doing?
I was 17. I was still in high school. I decided I wanted to go into the Army and make the Army. I thought I was going to make the Army a living, make it a living for me, and that I was just doing mediocre in high school, and I thought, well, I might as well go in the Army and make something of myself and become what they called at that time, I don't know what to call it now, a lifer.
Yeah.
And so that's basically why I went in the Army and volunteered for the Army.
And how did your family feel about you going?
Oh, my mother was upset about it. My father was okay with it. She didn't want me going, of course, being a mother, and my father knew about wars and that, and he was for it. He knew I wasn't doing that great in school, and he thought I could get a better education in the Army too.
Okay. So you leave and head for, well, you enlisted. Obviously,
Correct.
you weren't drafted. You enlisted, and then you headed off for basic training. So what?
Fort Leonard,
Yeah,
Illinois.
go ahead and tell us about that. And what were your first impressions, like when you first?
That was hard. It was hard at first because I was the old days. It's different now. They can hold up tickets against their instructors and things like that and say, don't do that to me and that. When I went in, you did exactly what the instructors did. If you weren't doing a push-up right, they'd step on your back and make you do it right. And they were a lot stricter and harder on you at that time and that. There was some people that had a hard time making it through it. There was one older gentleman that had joined, and he had a very hard time doing it. He ended up having to go through basic training 2 times to make it. That I know if he made it, I'm not sure. And that it was a crazy time. You learned a lot, and it was winter time too, so it was a little hard doing everything out there in the cold in the winter.
And well, how did you feel when you first went in? Was it a shock, or was
it was? I was a little more shocking than scared. You're gonna be scared. You go in and that. You're facing elements of people you've never met before. You're living in a building with a bunch of people you don't know. You have to get along with everyone. You did get along and that, but I found out right away there was fractions, and that I guess that's what you'd call it. There's the ones, of course, that volunteered, which was only a few of us. Most of them were drafted. The draftees, you weren't quickly, not to mention that you had joined the Army. There was a lot of hostility towards you because you volunteered, you joined. They were drafted, didn't want to be there. So you had that to contend with too, but.
What kind of issues did that cause?
Oh, that would cause, if they knew you volunteered, you could end up in fights and getting beat up and different things like that too. And just the way they treated you.
Mm-hmm.
And that we we had heard from other people and seen in other buildings and things that had happened, so that we learned very quickly not to mention that ourselves. And it went a lot smoother. Then we were okay with everybody, got along with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
During the course of my whole term in the Army, you kept that kind of quiet. You didn't say you volunteered for, to join. I'll put it that way. And that.
I assume that you had memorable instructors. Are there any that you remember that really stick out to you?
Not really. Just one that was very hard on me. Of course, he stuck out on me. He was a black gentleman and Afro-American, and he was a very hard instructor in that. I appreciate it. As I went through basic training, getting out of it, you appreciated what he did.
Mm-hmm.
You ended up appreciating him. At first he was hard. Oh, he was a horrible instructor. But then as you went through it and everything, then you learned, okay, he's doing it for your benefit. Your benefit. You find that out when you go to war, especially. You don't really realize all of it until you're in a war. Then you're going to understand what he meant and everything. Doing what they say at the spur of the moment. Not arguing with them about things, not saying, oh gee, I don't really want to do this. You do it, because if you didn't do it, you could be dead.
Mm-hmm.
So you learned that your sergeant was doing the best for you, and that's where you get grateful for him. So I'm grateful that he was so hard on me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little harder on the troops that come out now, because they're too soft, I think. But that's my opinion on that.
Do you recall the food and
food was great. It was good. There was no problem with the food. You ate a lot. You got a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You needed a lot. You were running and jumping and doing all those exercises and everything, so you ate a lot. It was good. It was just normal.
All right.
We learned how to peel potatoes.
All right. When you came to the end of your basic training time and you'd passed, what advanced training did you go to?
I went into the artillery. I fought and I wanted artillery. I had two choices, aviation mechanics and artillery. Aviation mechanics was full at the time. I was thinking of becoming a mechanic, so I had to go into my second choice, which was the artillery. And so I learned artillery there. That was just basic training on how to load cannons, shoot them, everything else that went along with our cannons and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That was just your AIT training in that. That was pretty mediocre, however you want to put it. There wasn't no excitement there. Just go to school every day, learn, go out in the field, learn what you can, or learn how to shoot it, how your shells, the different packs of gunpowder that go in them, as far as how far it's going to shoot, your elevations, things of that nature. And that. From there, I went to Germany.
Okay.
Germany was a little more fun at first, because it was self-propelled. It wasn't artillery pieces that you towed behind a vehicle. You actually got to drive them too. It's like a tank, but with an artillery gun on top of it. And that was a lot of fun. That I enjoyed for the time I was there. And that, because you got to shoot you had to shoot them at, you took turns, you learned how to drive them, you learned how to, you learned quite a few different things being in a self-propelled unit.
Mm-hmm.
It was different than a standalone unit. It was interesting. It was fun in that. I met a lot of people from Vietnam and Germany, and that's where I started to think about volunteering for Germany, because they were the type, they were good guys, they had made it through Vietnam, and they were telling me about it and their stories and everything, and telling me, well, you're going to go to Vietnam anyhow, you might as well join. If you join, volunteer to go out there now, you might as well go there and get it over with. You're going to have to go anyhow. If your time's up, you're going to die, you're going to die. If you're not going to die. So volunteer, get in there early, get it over with. Mm-hmm. And that way I could get a little more rank, extra ranking for volunteering to go there. So I took their advice, and I did volunteer for it, and I did end up in Vietnam pretty quickly then. As soon as I was 18, I was already in Vietnam, where most people didn't get to go there, or didn't go there till 19. So I was one of the youngest ones in there at that time.
What was your duty when you first arrived in Vietnam?
I was just a basic artilleryman. It was air mobile. First scout was air mobile, which meant helicopters. They'd pick up and bring the artillery pieces and your ammo and everything on the big helicopters, and then we'd follow up in ours or in the same helicopter sometimes, the big ones, and land in a landing base. They called them LZs at first. Well, at first we were in a big division. Okay, and from there, then you went out with your units into your company, and you got stationed with a company, and that was out in the jungle, and that was in what do you call it, a base, an army base, which is just a berm of dirt around you in a big circle, and that with barbed wire in that, and you had to protect your base and protect the men around you. You had your infantry and you had your artillery and everything in there, and you protected everybody with your artillery. And that was a crazy time. That was the craziest time of my service, was in Vietnam and going out there and serving that way. We were air mobile, so we did move around at times. We'd go to one base and then move over to another base, as we had to take different areas, and as the infantry moved in and took areas, because then we'd follow up behind them and protect them. And I stayed in that unit for about a month. And then I got to meet people in the infantry and people in my unit that went out with the infantry. And they went out there and they became what they call forward observers. It's basically a lieutenant slot. You go out there, basically you start out as a radio man, and you volunteer to go out as a radio man. There are not enough lieutenants and enough of them to do a forward observer's position. And a forward observer's position was to you plot out where you're at. You have to be very careful on your maps, find out where you are, where you're at, moving around in the jungles or in the hill country or the grasslands, depending on where you're at that time. And then you have to learn to plot out and call in your artillery, call in the mortars and everything. You're the one out there that's going to call it in and keep it within a few hundred feet of yourself to get the enemy, but not yourselves. You had to be very careful with that. There was some crazy times with that. I'll explain that later. But that's what I did. I could earn more rank that way. You're a radio man at first. Within a week, they give you the you get the maps, you get everything. They have an infantryman takes over the radio, and you are that forward observer. And so I did that for most of my term out there. And it was a crazy time with the infantry. And sometimes it would be fun coming back to base. Of course, it was great. You get to celebrate. You're back. You're alive. Relax. Enjoy your time under the jungle and that. But then back in you go, and you go back into the jungle, and you go into the grasslands and you fight. We were air calv, which meant we moved around a lot more than most. So we could be in jungle some days or for a month. Next month we could be in the grasslands. And that some crazy incidences there. It was some fun times too. I remember we were in Vietnam only, could not go into Cambodia. They'd come across the border and attack us, but we could not go across the border and attack them. It made it a little more difficult in our warfare that way, not being able to cross borders. That made it a little harder, and that. But we did that for a while. It was different instances happened, some crazy times. I remember one time we're walking down the trail. Once in a while I'd volunteer to walk point, which is first man in line. If the CO thought it was safe that day, he'd let me go out and walk point. But of course it was getting dangerous. He didn't want me there because I'm the one that has to call in the protection, the artillery and the mortars, or the jets to bring everything in if we needed it. So. But a few times it was fun to walk point and that. One day I was going to walk point and he decided not to have me walk point. Thank God, because the first man in line got shot down. They crossfired on him. They had cut some trees down on the trail. He come walking up and they both shot at him, and he ended up with about 6-8 rounds in him, and he went down hard. I don't know if he lived or not. We never heard. He would ship back after the firefight was done and that. So I was grateful that day. There was a few days though where I almost got it. I was walking in line one day through the jungle areas at that time, and one of the enemy was shooting out of the jungle. We didn't even see him. I seen the 3 men in front of me go down. I seen the men behind me go down. So I went down with them, thinking, "Oh God, everybody's going down because they're shooting." And then you start hearing bullets whizzing by. So I laid down, I started shooting into the jungle. My gun jammed, of all things. I'm like, oh my God, now what am I gonna do? I looked at a guy next to me, what do I do? My gun's jammed. Here he's groaning and moaning. I looked to the other side, he's groaning and moaning. They were all shot up. I was the only one the bullets missed, so I had plenty of guns to use until that firefight was over and that. And I grabbed somebody else's weapon and kept shooting and firing until it was over and that. But I was lucky that day. It could have been a lot worse. I could have been shot up, hurt, maimed, or dead that day. Luckily, everybody did survive that day. They were shot up bad, some of them, but they made it. Another time, a rocket went off in a tree above my head. And that was a crazy time. The rocket went off, misfired, and it went off and hit the tree above me. It got the guys around me. They all got it. I didn't get a hair. Never got even a scratch. And that. There's been a few other times in firefights where the bullets whizzed by and I ducked and I got lucky. I never even got a Purple Heart. I was a little mad at that. I wanted a Purple Heart. A lot of guys were getting a Purple Heart. I never even got that. Now I'm kind of grateful I did not get that Purple Heart, because a lot of Purple Hearts came with hard times. That was it as far as that goes. There was another time we went into Cambodia. That was different. We finally were allowed to go into Cambodia. That was a Cambodian campaign. They allowed us to go in. Unfortunately, they had warned, the Vietnamese had enough warning that we were coming and that. And so when we got there wasn't as many to fight as we thought there were going to be. They had moved out of their big underground bunkers and their tunnels and everything, and they moved out of certain areas. We ran into them at one base. It was an ammo cache, and we ran into them there. We had to fight that one and take it over. We took it over. We got all their weapons, everything out of that. It was a medical cache. They had left just before us. We got their medical, but they were gone already. No, there was a mobile cache where they had all their vehicles and things like that, but nothing was left there and that. But I remember one time we landed in an area and it was up on a hilltop. We all landed in that and we were setting up base, starting to set up base and everything. And all of a sudden here come these water buffalo out of the blue. They come running up and everybody thought, oh, let's get them, we'll get fresh meat for tonight. Because all you get is sea rations. You know, once in a great while you get a hot meal, but it's always sea rations and that. So they started shooting and we all did, a bunch of us started shooting and we shot down one of the water buffalo. All right, we get fresh meat for night, this is great. Drag them into the base and that. All of a sudden we find out, oh gee, we just shot the villagers' water buffalo. They depended on those water buffalo for plowing and everything else. And that the reason I say it was a fun time is because I got to meet Cambodians. I got to meet tribal people I never would have met in my life. And that was interesting. And that we had to bring them a lot of rice and a lot of food to make up for that water buffalo. And I volunteered with these, they're like, it's a 3-man little vehicle. It's, how can I explain it? It's smaller than a Volkswagen. They're small, little flat cars, a little flat bench on them with 4 wheels, little off-roading kind of like vehicle you sat on. We threw on all the rice and that, and we'd go down the trails, and we went down the hill and trails to the village. They had moved their village because the one they originally had was blown up by artillery and that. No, by bombs. That was from bombs. Those craters were big. And that, and we met the villagers and that. So that was interesting to meet villagers and sit there and talk. The interpreters would talk to them and everything and that. Learned about rice wine, big vats, and with water and leaves on top, minted leaves on top, and these bamboo shoots sticking out of them. And of course, you had to, which we didn't mind, of course, being as we were out there. So you were with the interpreter. You could not say no. If they offered you something, you took it. And one of the things they offered us besides food was the rice wine. That's like, I learned now that's more like sake. That was some strong stuff. And you take the tube and the bamboo shoot and you just suck on it until you can't drink anymore in one pull of it. And then they just added a little more water to it and that. So we had fun with that. Met the villagers and that. Learned about diseases. I learned about, what was that called? Elephant something. Where parts of you grow gigantically large. And that there was a couple of the villagers I felt sorry for, where they had parts of them, a limb or a leg or whatever, that grew very large. Elephantitis or something was called. And it was pretty shocking to see that. and that they did, you know, the interpreter would say there's nothing they can do about it, they already have it, they can't, but they'd vaccine the villagers and things and do things like that when they met them and give them vaccinations and that, but they even told us then they had to be careful, because if the North Vietnamese ever came back and found out they had given them stuff, they could be harmed and hurt because of that. So but it was interesting. It was very fun at that time, meeting other people, meeting Cambodians, and that. Met a lot of Vietnamese, of course, back on base. I ended up, well, that was it for out in the field, fighting and earning rank and doing that. My time was up. I went back to the rear. I had another month and a half to go before I was flown back to the States and that. I ended up going to town, ended up getting a girlfriend. Never thought I'd date somebody from there, but I started going out with this one girl there. She was 2 years younger than me. So I'm 18, she was 16. Puppy love, I call it puppy love. And that, you see it on the movies, and nowadays the old movies show some of those things about wars and falling in love with the people there. I fell in love with her and that, but spent a lot of time there in town, visiting with her and her mother and that, and helping them. I'd bring them things they needed and stuff, of course, and that, and they'd feed me and take care of me while I was in town. Sometimes I'd be a bad boy, you might say, or a bad soldier, and sneak out and stay overnight there. You weren't allowed to, but I did, to be with her and everything and that. And if the North Vietnamese came through the city or the village, at that time it was a bigger village, almost like a city, so they had to hide you. They had to go hide. They had hollow walls in their buildings they had for protection. They'd protect their young men that way too, so they wouldn't get dragged off. They have to fight for the North Vietnamese. So that's how they protected me. They put me in a hollow wall. I remember one night that happened. That actually happened. I could hear them talking to the North Vietnamese and everything. So it was interesting. That was scary. That was a scary night for me and everything. Unfortunate part was my papers got cut short and I had to leave early. I had planned on marrying her, and the choice came down: do you go home, or do you stay? If you stay, you're going to miss your flight out. It's going to take months more, and I was told it would take maybe 3 months to do all the paperwork, everything else. And then I finally decided to go home and try to do paperwork from home and get her there. But once he left there, I found out it was impossible to get her back or get her to the States, so that was the end of that. That was my main time there.
So, you said you ate with some of the villagers and that. Was the food interesting, or
oh, that
good
was
to
yeah,
you,
that was like, okay, do you want to eat it or not? Some of it was bugs. I don't know, you see movies on places where in Africa and stuff where they eat bugs. I got news for you, they eat bugs in Cambodia too. They do. Something snake, they'll eat snakes, they'll eat bugs. They also have meat, but the meat is not meat from a water buffalo or that. You don't ask questions. You just ate it and didn't ask questions, that's for sure. You didn't really want to know where that food came from. You drink enough sake, or what they call, it's not called sake, but you drink enough of the rice wine or whatever you want to call it, so you really didn't think about what you were eating. You were pretty well buzzed out on that, and so, okay, yeah, I'm happy, okay, let's eat, and you'd eat it. That was interesting. That was fun, though.
Were you able to make to make friends, or that lasted a while you were there? Yeah,
while we were there. Once we left, you kind of left contact. I knew one man from New York, a couple other men. There were fractions in the Army. You had your white people that were prejudiced against blacks, you had your blacks who were prejudiced against whites, and then you had the group I was in, which weren't prejudiced. And that half my friends were black, some were Mexican, I was white. It was a mix. We were a mixture of all three, and we had to, whether you were in the jungle or back on base or in a town, wherever you were, you watched each other's backs. When you were back on base, you had to watch each other's backs so the fractions wouldn't attack or try to cause you harm, I'll put it that way, especially in bars and bar fights and things like that. And that out in the jungle, you had the same thing, more prejudice there at times, and you had to watch it because okay, firefights, accidents happen. Oh, gee, he got shot by his own people. So you watch each other's backs that way, so nothing like that would happen to you or your friends. There was one black man especially in that, what was his name, Eric, I don't remember his last name, but we were very close. We got to be very close, and I would have died for him and he would have died for me. It's just that simple, like we're brothers. And we just stuck to each other like glue, and that whenever we were around each other. And that he was in the 1 infantry unit I was with, and that and eventually I got moved off to a different infantry unit. So it was me in my position. It was hard to keep friends because you kept moving, and that I wasn't on a base where you had your camaraderie or whatever you call it with your different artillery folks and everything, and you stuck with them the whole time there. I wasn't in an infantry unit where you were with the same infantry unit the whole time. I was an artillery observer, so I'd be with that infantry for a month or two, maybe, or 3 months. When I knew him, it was 3 months. 3 months with him, then I'd move on and be with another infantry unit. So you always were making new friends and changing friends and that. And people get to know you, they get to know who you are. One unit talks to another, especially on base. So one company of men, the Army, would be talking to the other infantry, so they know you before you even get there, and you get to meet them before you get there. So at least that made it a little easier.
I was just going to ask, how did you deal with knowing that you're not only fighting the enemy, but you're fighting an enemy within?
I know, that was hard. Because
of the prejudice. How did you deal with that?
You did. It was hard. It was hard. I never realized it would be like that. I thought everybody, you're in the Army, you're all together, you fight together, you live together, you're all one unit, one. That's what we thought. And going through, like I said, going through basic training, my sergeant was black. I thought nothing of it. I grew up non-prejudiced family, okay, to a point. My father was a little prejudiced. His best labor in the at home where he worked was black. They did side work on weekends together all the time. It was like the best of friends, but they both said they were prejudiced. So that didn't fly very well with me. I'm like, okay, you're prejudiced, yet you hang out together, you eat together, you work together, you're even the weekends together. That doesn't make it. You know, you talk one way to be macho hard, I'll put it that way, but then when you're together, it's different. So I didn't grow up very much. I didn't grow up prejudiced. Because of that, it made it easy, made it different for me in the war. And that I couldn't see the people that were white or black or Mexican, how they could be prejudiced. Yeah, but I didn't grow up the way they did. I didn't grow up in an inner city where maybe they had problems with the other races and things like that. I grew up in the suburbs. It was a little different. You didn't have as many. You had a few blacks, a few Mexicans in the schools. Back then, not very many. But I think basic training taught me a little that way too. And then getting in the Army and meeting other guys, you found out who you got along with and everything, and you stuck together. You stuck together and protected each other. There were times we had to protect each other, especially in the bars, and that they get out of hand at times, and you'd have some fights going on in that, but you watch each other and you fought with each other. And out in the jungle it was a little better. That was the most relaxed time. Either on base, not at bars, that was more relaxed, but you still had to watch it for fighting and that in the barracks and things. But I'd say the jungle was the easiest because they weren't too busy. There wasn't as much wanting to get the other person in your own kind, because you had the enemy to watch out for. You had the enemy to worry about. That was more important. So you didn't have to worry about it. If you were in a big firefight, your group would stick together, they would stick over there, because you didn't want to get shot by them or them shoot you. Vice versa and that, so yeah, it could go both ways. So you just watched it and you stayed together. And it worked out a lot nicer. So I kind of like the jungle better, I don't know. Except for when you fall in ant pits, that isn't much fun. Scorpions are not much fun out there. Yeah, I've seen one guy, he put on a flak jacket, and when he did, the scorpion was between his jacket and his back, and he got stung like 6 times by the scorpion and that, and they mediced him out and that. We came back to base later. We happened to be going back to base, and we got back to base, and here he was walking around the next day, he was just floating around and happy as can be. They shot him up with a lot of drugs to cover the pain in that while they treated him for the venom and everything that got in him and that. But
So
ant pits were horrible.
Oh, tell me
Ant
about
pits
that.
were that was in the flatlands. That's in the grasslands. You're just walking around the trail. Don't step off the trail or watch where you're walking, because you can fall into an ant pit and they'll be up to your knees and you're down in the ground. And because the ants burrow under the ground, red ants, fire ants they call them. And you fall in those pits and they're all over you. And oh my God, you're just ripping your clothes off and beating yourself to death, getting all the red ants off you because they'll just keep stinging you, biting you. And it's like fire. That's why they call them fire ants. That was some crazy times too. And other times were the swamplands. Going to swamplands, you got to check each other out. You don't even know they're on you until you get out. You find leeches all over you. You got to check each other out and get the leeches off each other and that. Yeah, that was leeches all over you. Okay, let's get them off. You have to get the leeches off you.
Yeah.
That was it. Spiders, God, they could grow this big. Literally, the bodies would get about like this and their legs like this. They had big webs across the trails and between the trees and that. I mean, you didn't really have to worry about them. They never got bit by a spider or hurt anything that could kill you. They had two-steppers, what they call little green snakes. They were called two-steppers. Supposedly you take 2 steps and you're dead. Basically what it is 2 steps and you're falling down. If you don't get treatment right away, really quickly, you're going to die from it though. They were very poisonous. They were worse than the scorpions, actually. I don't know. It was just crazy times there. I remember one time in a firefight on the base, not a firefight, when I was with the artillery at that evening, we thought there was a blip on the radar, and it looked like maybe it was a squad of men coming at us, and they started shooting at them with the artillery, and that, and then the infantry went in and stopped moving. Okay, got them. The infantry went out the next day and found out, oh gee, we just killed a big giant gorilla. It was a gorilla in the jungle. They shot a gorilla, and that. So that was interesting. It was different. Who would think you'd have gorillas in Vietnam? Thought that was only in Africa, not there. It was just crazy times like that. And I don't know. Just the weird things you run across over there.
What rank had you achieved by the time you were ready to?
I was an
get out?
E4.
E4, okay.
E4.
All right, so.
I was going to be a lifer, but I decided with the war and what I seen over there and everything, I decided not to be a lifer. I decided I didn't want to fight for the rest of my life and be in wars like that. My mindset had changed. So then when time was up, I was out. That was it. I left.
Okay. All right, so when you went home, how was it when you returned home? How were you received?
Not good. You had to be careful. As soon as I got home, I was kind of used to it because of being a volunteer in the Army. Okay, volunteering, you had the people like I told you in the beginning, they were against you because you joined and they got drafted. Well, you had that to contend with. When you got out, you had the opposite. You had the others to contend with. You had all the hippies and all the people that were against the war. And, oh, you went to Vietnam. And they didn't care if you were drafted or not. You fought in the war. You're a bad person because you fought in that war. And let alone to tell them I volunteered for it, that would have been worse. So my sisters, my younger sisters, they had warned me, you be careful, you don't talk about it. And I seen it. I said, okay, they're hippies, they believe peace, love, and that, but they would sure gang together sometimes and beat up somebody. Well, where's your peace and love, and you're beating up somebody that fought in a war? I mean, so that was a ridiculous time. That was sad. It was not good. So you learn to keep your mouth shut and just, oh yeah, I was in college, or yeah, I just moved in, I was somewhere else, or whatever, at first. Once you're there for a while, then everybody kind of gets to know you and meet other people. They just think you were always there. It was never really brought up, did you fight in a war or not? So I never had to contend with that. Yeah.
Well, did you, when you were immediately out and had gone back home, what did you do?
Oh, I hung out. I just kind of hung out and was glad to be out. I'll put it that way. And I just kind of flopped around for about a year. Took my time getting recycled back into civilian life and just enjoying the time to be free again and be able to do what I want and everything. And kind of like a giant vacation. for about a year. Then I went back into work. I ended up in the same thing my father did. That is, I learned to work on buildings, and it's called tuck pointing. That's fixing and repairing brick and stone and masonry buildings, and that fixing and repairing, whether it's a house to a high rise. And I eventually went into the union, and I ended up on the high rises downtown Chicago, hanging off the outside. There's one good thing war did, it gets you so you're not afraid of as much stuff. So I used to hang off the high rises and repair and fix them. And that's what I did most of my life after that.
Well, if you could think, is there one thing that you can think of from your service that taught you like a life lesson, or that you're still using today in your thoughts and the way you...
How I treat people. I would say that's how you treat people. Okay, not being prejudiced. You see it out here in the world still today. Mm-hmm. It's still out there. There's still people that are prejudiced wherever you go. And I think that's the best thing I've learned in life, is that we're all equal. We all bleed the same. We're all the same. We're all human beings. And there is no differences. And I get a little angry with people that are prejudiced. I have a little company of my own that I have, a tuck pointing company of my own, and I'm not prejudiced. I'll hire somebody I've hired anywhere from black people, Mexicans, criminals, whatever, in my life, in my time, and it didn't matter to me. What mattered to me is the person themselves, who they are. Because bad people come in all colors. You can be a white person and steal just as bad as anybody else. I've had more white people steal from me and lie to me than I have black or Mexican. It's just the way it is.
Well, is there anything that you would like to say to future generations who might see or hear your interview today? Just anything you would like to say to them?
Just be careful. The world out there is changing, and I think we have to be very careful of that. And without getting into politics, that won't go anywhere here, or shouldn't. I would say just love each other. The main thing is to love each other in this world. You know, it's not, war is not where it's at. War, whatever the reason. I mean, there's times when we have to fight. I believe in it. There's times we have to fight. We have to protect ourselves, protect our families, protect the way we live. And what we have here in America. Not many countries have it as free as we have it.
Right.
And I've been to other countries. I've been to, my second wife was Filipino. She was a nurse. She took care of me when I was hurt one time. But I've been to the Philippines. I've been to other countries too now. And in Germany, I've been to European countries. I've been to different countries and see how people live. And we're lucky. We're lucky here in America. We have a lot more than most people. And we should be very thankful for that, and not think, oh gee, well, I don't like this politician, or our government doesn't do this. Well, I got news for you. Our government's a lot better than anyone else in the world. I wouldn't give that up for anything. I think we all should be aware of that, and also be aware of other people in this world and show them love. That's what's going to take over. It's not a hippie thing. It's more of a, I think it's going to prevail. God's love. Go on with that.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today and share your story, and thank you for your service to our country.
Hey, thanks.